Grace Chen wiped her tired eyes as she pulled out of Riverside General Hospital's parking lot. Another 16-hour shift was finally over. Her scrubs felt heavy with exhaustion, and all she wanted was to get home to her small farm, feed her chickens, and collapse into bed. The rain had started an hour ago, turning into a proper storm. Lightning split the dark sky every few seconds, and thunder rolled across the hills like a freight train. Grace gripped her steering wheel tighter as she drove down the winding country road toward home. This was the worst part about living 20 minutes outside town. Nights like this when the weather turned ugly. She was thinking about whether she had enough coffee for tomorrow morning when her headlights caught something that made her heart skip. About 50 yards ahead, she could see the back end of a pickup truck sticking up from the ditch. The truck was flipped completely over, wheels pointing toward the stormy sky. Grace pulled over immediately and grabbed her phone. No signal. Of course not. The cell towers always went out in storms like this. She reached into her glove box for the small flashlight she kept there and stepped out into the rain. The cold water soaked through her scrubs in seconds. She half ran, half slipped down into the muddy ditch toward the overturned truck. The front end was completely smashed against an old oak tree. Grace's nurse training kicked in as she circled the vehicle, looking for the best way to reach whoever might be inside. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called out, but only heard the storm answering back. She found him hanging upside down in the driver's seat, held in place by his seatbelt. A man who looked to be in his 30s with dark hair and broad shoulders. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. Grace pressed 2 fingers to his neck and felt a steady pulse. "Thank goodness, sir. Can you hear me?" She tapped his shoulder gently. He groaned but didn't open his eyes. Grace knew she had to get him out of there. The truck could shift or worse, catch fire. But moving someone with possible head and neck injuries was dangerous. Still, leaving him hanging upside down wasn't an option either. She managed to brace his body with one arm while cutting his seatbelt with the small knife from her keychain. He was heavier than she expected, but years of lifting patience had made her stronger than she looked. Inch by careful inch, she got him out of the truck and onto level ground. In the beam of her flashlight, she could see he was breathing normally. His right ankle was bent at an odd angle, definitely sprained, maybe broken. When she felt along his ribs, he winced even in his unconscious state. Broken ribs, most likely. The head wound was bleeding but didn't look too deep. His wallet had fallen out of his back pocket. Grace opened it, looking for emergency contact information. The driver's license read Cole Mitchell, age 34. No photos of family, no business cards, just $43 in cash and a credit card. His clothes were simple. Worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and work boots that had seen better days. Grace looked back at her car, then at Cole, then up at the stormy sky. The nearest hospital was 45 minutes away on a good day. In this weather, it could take over an hour, and that was assuming her old Honda could even make it through the flooding that was probably happening on the main roads by now. She made a decision that would change both their lives. Getting Cole into her car was the hardest thing Grace had done in years. She managed to half carry, half drag him up the muddy slope and fold him into her back seat. She grabbed an old blanket from her trunk and tucked it around him, then drove home as carefully as she could manage. Her farmhouse was small but comfortable. Grace had inherited it from her grandmother 3 years ago, along with 5 acres and a stubborn old rooster named General. She pulled right up to the front porch and then faced the challenge of getting Cole inside. 20 minutes later, she had him lying on her living room couch. Grace had turned the space into a makeshift medical unit. She brought her blood pressure cuff from the bedroom closet. She always kept basic medical supplies at home, a habit from nursing school. His blood pressure was a little low but stable. Pupils were responsive, which was a good sign. She cleaned the cut on his forehead with antiseptic and butterflied it closed. No stitches needed, thank goodness. The ankle was definitely sprained, possibly fractured. Grace wrapped it carefully and elevated it on pillows. The ribs were harder to assess, but from the way he breathed, she guessed 2, maybe 3 were cracked, all through the night. Grace woke up every hour to check on Cole. She tested his reflexes, monitored his breathing, and watched for signs of brain swelling. Each time he seemed a little more responsive. By morning, the storm had passed, and weak sunlight was filtering through her kitchen windows. Cole opened his eyes just as Grace was checking his pulse for the 100th time. "Where he started to say, then winced as speaking made his ribs hurt. You're safe, Grace said softly. I found you in an accident last night. You were unconscious, so I brought you here to help you. Cole tried to sit up, then immediately regretted it. My truck, totaled, I'm afraid, hit a tree in the storm. Do you remember what happened? Cole closed his eyes, thinking. Rain was coming down hard. Something ran across the road, a deer, I think. I swerved and... He opened his eyes and really looked at Grace for the first time. You saved my life. Grace felt her cheeks warm. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. Most people would have called for help and waited. My phone had no signal, and you needed help immediately. Grace stood up, suddenly feeling shy under his grateful gaze. Are you hungry? You should eat something. Over breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast that Grace insisted he eat slowly. Cole learned he'd been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. Grace learned that Cole worked on ranches around the area and was driving home from a job when the accident happened. I can't stay here, Cole said, trying again to stand up. This time he made it to his feet but swayed dangerously. I need to get back to work. The cattle need feeding and... Grace caught his arm as he nearly fell. The only place you're going is back to that couch. You have a concussion, broken ribs, and a sprained ankle. You're not going anywhere for at least a week. I can't afford a week off work, Cole said quietly. Something in his voice made Grace's heart ache. She'd seen that look before. The pride of someone who worked hard but barely got by. Then it's a good thing you're not paying me for medical care. Cole studied her face. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Grace thought about it for a moment. Because everyone deserves help when they need it. And because... She paused, not wanting to sound foolish. Because I think good people are worth saving. For the first time since waking up, Cole smiled. It was a small smile, but it transformed his whole face. Thank you, Grace. I promise I'll make this up to you somehow. Just get better, Grace said. That's payment enough. As she helped him back to the couch, Grace had no idea that the mysterious ranch hand she'd saved was about to turn her quiet life completely upside down. The next morning, Grace woke up to find Cole trying to limp around her kitchen, attempting to make coffee. She watched from the doorway as he gritted his teeth with each step, clearly in pain but determined not to show it. What are you doing? She asked, rushing over to steady him. Making breakfast, Cole said stubbornly. You've done enough for me already. Grace gently took the coffee pot from his hands. You have 3 broken ribs and a sprained ankle. Sit down before you hurt yourself worse. I'm not used to being taken care of, Cole admitted as he reluctantly sat at her small kitchen table. I've been looking after myself since I was 16. Well, get used to it for the next few days, Grace said, starting the coffee herself. Doctor's orders. Over the following week, Grace fell into a routine. She'd wake up early, check on Cole, make breakfast, then head to the hospital for her 12-hour shift. When she came home, she'd find Cole exactly where she'd left him on the couch, though she suspected he'd been moving around more than he should have been. On the 3rd day, she came home to find her broken porch railing fixed. Cole Mitchell, she said, hands on her hips. What did I tell you about resting? Cole looked up from where he was sitting on the porch steps, a satisfied smile on his face. I rested plenty. Just couldn't stand looking at that loose railing anymore. It was dangerous. You're supposed to be recovering from a head injury. My head's fine, Cole said. It's just a few bumps and bruises. Grace sat down beside him on the steps. You could have fallen. Made everything worse. Cole turned to look at her. Grace, I've been fixing things since I could hold a hammer. This is nothing compared to some of the work I've done. There was something in his voice, a confidence that seemed bigger than just ranch work. But before Grace could think about it too much, Cole changed the subject. How was your day at the hospital? Grace's face fell. Not great, actually. We had another meeting about budget cuts today. Budget cuts? The hospital's in trouble, Grace explained. Really bad trouble? They've already laid off 6 nurses this month, and there are rumors they might have to close the whole place. Cole's expression grew serious. That would be terrible for this community. It would be a disaster, Grace agreed. The next closest hospital is over an hour away. People could die waiting for help. She rubbed her tired eyes. I love my job, but more than that, these people need us, Mrs. Patters. Ann brings her grandkids in when they have fevers. Old Mr. Rodriguez comes in twice a week to check his blood pressure. They trust us. Cole listened intently, and Grace noticed something strange in his expression. like he was filing away every detail she shared. Have they looked for investors? Someone who might want to help? Cole asked. The board's tried everything, Grace said. But who wants to invest in a small rural hospital? There's no money in it. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes the best investments aren't about money. Grace looked at him curiously. That's a pretty wise thing for a ranch hand to say. Cole's face reddened slightly. I've learned a few things over the years. By the end of the week, Cole was moving around much better, though Grace insisted he still wasn't ready to leave. She'd grown used to having him around, and if she was honest with herself, she didn't want him to go. Cole seemed to feel the same way. Instead of pushing to leave, he started helping around her small farm. Despite her protests, he fixed her leaky roof, mended her chicken coop, and even got her old tractor running again. You don't have to do all this, Grace said one evening as they watched the sunset from her porch. Cole had just finished repairing her broken fence, and her chickens were happily exploring areas they hadn't been able to reach in months. I want to, Cole said simply. You saved my life. This is the least I can do. You already fixed my porch, my roof, and my chicken coop. I think we're even, Cole smiled. Not even close. They'd fallen into an easy friendship over the week. Cole was different from anyone Grace had ever met. He was quiet but thoughtful, and when he did speak, he said things that mattered. He listened when she talked about her work, her dreams, her fears about the hospital closing. What about you? Grace asked as they sat on the porch swing Cole had repaired that afternoon. What are your dreams? Cole was quiet for so long that Grace thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I dream about making a difference. Really helping people, not just getting by day to day. You already make a difference. The work you do on ranches feeds people. It's not the same, Cole said. I want to do something that matters. Something lasting. Grace studied his face in the fading light. You talk like someone who's got big plans. Cole looked uncomfortable. Just dreams, mostly. The next morning, Grace woke up to the smell of bacon cooking. She found Cole in her kitchen, moving around much more easily than he had been. Your ankle's better, she observed. Much better. The ribs, too. Cole plated eggs and bacon for both of them. I should probably head out today. Find work. Grace's heart sank, but she tried not to show it. If you think you're ready? I don't want to overstay my welcome. You're not, Grace said quickly. I mean, you're welcome to stay as long as you need to recover fully. Cole turned from the stove to look at her. Grace, I need to tell you something. He was interrupted by Grace's phone ringing. It was Dr. Rodriguez, the hospital's chief of staff. Grace, I need you to come in early today. We're having an emergency board meeting about the closure. Grace's face went pale. Closure? I thought we had more time. So did we. Can you be here in an hour? After Grace hung up, she sank into a chair. They're shutting us down. After all these years of serving this community, they're just giving up. Cole sat down across from her, his expression intense. What if they didn't have to? What do you mean? What if someone wanted to invest? Really invest, not just throw money at the problem, but fix it properly? Grace laughed bitterly. Cole, we'd need millions. New equipment, expanded facilities, enough money to run everything properly. Where would we find someone willing to do that? Cole opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Stranger things have happened. As Grace got ready for work, Cole helped her gather her things. At the door, she turned to face him. Will you still be here when I get back? Cole hesitated. I'll be here. Grace smiled with relief. Good. I've gotten used to having you around. After Grace left, Cole pulled out a cell phone that Grace had never seen before. He dialed a number and waited. It's me, he said when someone answered. I need you to set up a meeting with the board at Riverside General Hospital. Today. He paused. No, don't use my real name yet. Just tell them a potential investor wants to discuss the situation. Another pause. Yes, I'm sure. And make sure they know this investor is very serious about keeping the hospital open. Cole hung up the phone and looked around Grace's simple kitchen. For the first time in years, he'd found someone who saw him for who he really was, not what he could give them. Now he had to figure out how to help her without losing what they'd built together. He had no idea how complicated that was about to become. Grace came home from the hospital that evening feeling completely drained. The board meeting had been brutal. They had exactly 30 days to find a miracle investor or Riverside General would close forever. She found Cole sitting on her porch, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. When he looked up at her, his face was full of concern. How bad is it? He asked. Grace collapsed into the chair beside him. 30 days. That's all we have left. She watched as his hands stilled on the wood carving. They need $3 million just to keep the doors open and another $5 million to modernize everything properly. Cole set down his carving. Grace could see it was becoming a small bird. What did the board say about finding investors? They've tried everyone they can think of. Local businesses, medical corporations even reached out to some wealthy families in the state. Grace shook her head. Nobody wants to put money into a small rural hospital. There's no profit in it. Sometimes profit isn't the point, Cole said quietly. Grace looked at him curiously. You keep saying things like that. Most people I know think about money first. Cole's cheeks reddened. I guess I just think differently about some things. Over the next few days, Grace noticed Cole seemed distracted. He'd still help around the farm, still cook breakfast for her. But sometimes she'd catch him staring off into the distance with a troubled expression. A few times she'd seen him step outside to take phone calls, but he always walked far enough away that she couldn't hear what he was saying. Everything okay? She asked one morning as they sat on the porch with their coffee. Just thinking about work, Cole said. I should probably start looking for another ranch job soon. Grace felt her heart sink. She'd grown so comfortable with Cole being around that she'd started imagining he might stay permanently. You don't have to rush off. I mean, if you need more time to recover. Grace, Cole said softly, I can't stay here forever. Why not? The words slipped out before Grace could stop them. She felt her face burn with embarrassment. I just mean, you seem to like it here. And you're good at fixing things. Maybe you could find work locally. Cole reached over and took her hand. I do like it here. More than I've liked anywhere in a long time. The way he said it made Grace's pulse quicken. There was something in his eyes. Something that made her think he might feel the same connection she did. The Harvest Festival is this weekend, Grace said, trying to keep her voice casual. I always volunteer at the health screening booth. Would you like to come with me? Cole hesitated. I don't know. Big crowds aren't really my thing. It's not that big. Just the whole town, really. And I could use the help. We check blood pressure, blood sugar, that kind of thing. You could just hand out information flyers. After a moment, Cole nodded. Okay, I'd like to help. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the festival. Grace had borrowed a folding table from the hospital and set up their booth near the main stage. Cole helped her arrange pamphlets about heart health and diabetes prevention while she set up her blood pressure monitor. The morning went smoothly. Grace tested blood pressure and blood sugar for dozens of townspeople, while Cole handed out flyers and chatted with visitors. Grace was impressed by how easily he talked to people. He seemed to know just the right things to say to make them feel comfortable. Around noon, Mayor Thompson stopped by their booth. Grace, wonderful to see you as always, the mayor said. Then he turned to Cole with a completely different tone. Mr. Bennett, I wasn't expecting to see you here today. Grace looked between them in confusion. You two know each other? We've met, Cole said quickly, his face tense. Of course we have, Mayor Thompson continued, seemingly oblivious to Cole's discomfort. Mr. Bennett here is quite well known around these parts. Isn't that right, sir? I think you have me confused with someone else, Cole said firmly. The mayor looked puzzled for a moment, then seemed to catch on. Oh yes, of course. My mistake. Well, enjoy the festival. After he walked away, Grace stared at Cole. What was that about? I have no idea, Cole said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Some people think they know you when they don't. Before Grace could ask more questions, Mrs. Patterson approached with her 3 grandchildren in tow, wanting their blood pressure checked. Grace pushed her curiosity aside and got back to work. But throughout the afternoon, Grace noticed more strange interactions. The bank president nodded respectfully to Cole and called him sir. The owner of the feed store shook his hand enthusiastically and asked about the property. Even Dr. Rodriguez, when she stopped by the booth, seemed to recognize Cole and looked at him with an odd expression. Do you know him? G? Grace asked Dr. Rodriguez when Cole stepped away to throw out some trash. Dr. Rodriguez studied Grace's face carefully. Why do you ask? He's been staying at my place since his accident, but people here seem to know him, and he acts like he's never met them before. That's interesting, Dr. Rodriguez said thoughtfully. Grace, can I talk to you privately for a moment? They walked a few steps away from the booth. Dr. Rodriguez lowered her voice. I had an unusual phone call yesterday. Someone's interested in investing in the hospital. Grace's heart leaped. Really? Who? That's the strange part. They won't say. Just that they're very serious and want to meet with the board next week. Dr. Rodriguez glanced back at Cole. The caller knew an awful lot about our specific situation, our staffing, our equipment needs, even asked about our nursing staff by name. By name? Including yours, specifically. Dr. Rodriguez's expression was thoughtful. Grace, this mysterious investor seems to know quite a bit about our operations. More than someone would learn from just reading financial reports. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying? I'm saying someone has been asking very detailed questions about how we operate, what we need, and who our key people are. Dr. Rodriguez paused. The kind of questions someone would ask if they'd been getting inside information. Grace looked back at Cole, who was reorganizing their pamphlet display. That's probably just a coincidence. Probably, Dr. Rodriguez agreed. But Grace, be careful who you trust. In my experience, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. That evening, as Grace and Cole packed up their booth, Grace couldn't shake her conversation with Dr. Rodriguez. She kept thinking about all the strange interactions Cole had had throughout the day. Cole, she said as they loaded the folding table into her car, can I ask you something? Sure. Have you ever been to Riverside before your accident? Cole paused in his loading. No, why? It's just, a lot of people seem to recognize you today. Small towns, Cole said with a shrug. People are friendly. But Grace noticed he still wouldn't look directly at her. On the drive home, Cole was unusually quiet. When they reached Grace's farmhouse, he helped her carry everything inside, then said he was tired and wanted to rest. Grace lay awake that night, her mind racing. There was something Cole wasn't telling her, something important. The way people had treated him at the festival, Dr. Rodriguez's news about the mysterious investor, Cole's strange phone calls, it all felt connected somehow. She cared about Cole, maybe more than she should for someone she'd only known 2 weeks. But Dr. Rodriguez's words kept echoing in her mind. Be careful who you trust. Grace stared at the ceiling, wondering if the man sleeping on her couch was exactly who he seemed to be, or if there was much more to Cole Mitchell than he was letting on. Either way, she had a feeling she was about to find out. Monday morning started like any other day. Grace kissed Cole goodbye as she left for her shift at the hospital, and he promised to have dinner ready when she got home. But when Grace arrived at Riverside General, everything felt different. There was an energy in the air, a buzz of excitement she hadn't felt in months. Nurses were whispering in the hallways, and she could see several expensive cars in the parking lot, the kind that rarely showed up at their small rural hospital. Grace called Janet, one of the other nurses. Did you hear? The mysterious investor is here today. They're meeting with the board right now. Grace's heart jumped. Really, do we know who it is yet? Nobody's saying, but whoever it is came with lawyers and accountants. Big fancy suits everywhere. Janet lowered her voice. Rebecca from administration said she saw them looking at architectural plans. Like they're already planning to rebuild. Grace tried to focus on her patients, but she kept thinking about the meeting happening upstairs. Could this really be the miracle they needed? After weeks of doom and gloom, was someone actually going to save the hospital? Around lunchtime, Grace was walking past the conference room when she glanced through the glass windows. Her steps slowed, then stopped completely. Inside the conference room, she could see the board members seated around the large table. Charts and financial documents were spread everywhere. At the head of the table stood a man in an expensive navy suit, pointing to what looked like expansion plans. The man was Cole. Grace felt the world spin around her. She grabbed the wall for support, staring through the glass at the impossible scene in front of her. Cole, her Cole, who worried about missing work to feed cattle, was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Grace made in 3 months. He was talking confidently to the hospital board, gesturing at documents like he owned the place, which, Grace realized with growing shock, he probably did. Dr. Rodriguez noticed Grace standing in the hallway and came over to her. Grace, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. Grace couldn't take her eyes off Cole. Who is that man? Dr. Rodriguez followed her gaze. That's Jackson Bennett. He's the investor I told you about. She paused. Grace, why do you look so upset? This is good news. He's going to save the hospital. Jackson Bennett? Grace whispered. You know him? Grace's mouth felt dry. I thought I did. Dr. Rodriguez studied Grace's face with growing concern. Grace, what's wrong? Before Grace could answer, the conference room door opened. Cole Jackson stepped out, still deep in conversation with the hospital's chief administrator. When he looked up and saw Grace standing in the hallway, his face went completely white. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Grace saw the exact instant when Cole realized she knew everything. Grace, he started to say, but Grace was already walking away. Grace somehow made it through the rest of her shift, though she couldn't remember seeing any patients or doing any of her usual tasks. Her mind kept replaying the scene in the conference room over and over. Cole in that expensive suit, Cole talking about millions of dollars like it was nothing, Cole lying to her for weeks about who he really was. When her shift finally ended, Grace sat in her car in the parking lot trying to figure out what to do next. She didn't want to go home and face him. She didn't want to hear whatever explanation he might have. She felt hurt and angry and completely foolish. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Cole. Please come home. I can explain everything. Grace stared at the message for a long time, then drove home. She found Cole sitting on her porch steps, still wearing that expensive suit but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked up when she approached, his face full of worry and something that looked like fear. Grace, he said, standing up, I know you're angry. Angry? Grace laughed, but there was no humor in it. Cole, I don't even know what I am right now. My name is Jackson Bennett, Cole said quietly. Jackson Cole Bennett, actually. I've gone by Cole since I was a kid. Grace stared at him. So that part wasn't a lie? None of it was a lie, Grace, not the important parts. The important parts? Grace's voice rose. Cole, you let me worry about your job, about you not having money for doctor bills. I've been stretching my grocery budget to make sure you had enough to eat. And you're what, a millionaire? Grace, please let me explain. How much? Grace asked. How much money do you actually have? Cole looked down at his hands. A lot. How much? Enough to buy this entire town if I wanted to. Grace sank down onto the porch steps, feeling dizzy. Oh my God. Cole sat down beside her, but not too close. Grace, I never meant for it to happen this way. What way? You never meant to get caught? I never meant to fall in love with you. Grace looked at him sharply. Don't. It's true. Grace, I've spent my whole adult life having people treat me differently because of my money. People who want things from me, people who act like friends but really just see dollar signs. Cole's voice was urgent now. But you saved my life that night without knowing anything about me, except that I needed help. You took care of me, worried about me, cared about me as a person, while lying to me the entire time. I wasn't lying about who I am, Cole insisted. I was lying about what I have. There's a difference. Grace shook her head. Is there? Cole, I told you about the hospital's problems. I worried out loud about people losing their jobs, about patients who might not get the care they need. And you just sat there letting me worry when you could have fixed everything with a phone call. I wanted to tell you so many times, but you didn't. Cole was quiet for a moment. I was scared. Of what? Of this, Cole said, gesturing between them. Of you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm a stranger. Grace stood up abruptly. You are a stranger, Cole, Jackson, whoever you are. She turned to face him. The man I've been falling in love with was someone who understood what it was like to work hard and worry about money. Someone who fixed my fence because he was grateful, not because he was rich enough to hire someone else to do it. I am that man, Cole said, standing up too. The money doesn't change who I am inside, doesn't it? Grace asked. Because the man I thought I knew would never have let me worry about losing my job when he had the power to save it. He would never have watched me stress about hospital bills for patients when he could have paid them all without even noticing the expense. Cole looked stricken. Grace, I was trying to figure out how to help without ruining what we had. Well, congratulations, Grace said bitterly. You managed to ruin it anyway. She started to walk toward her front door, then turned back. Just tell me one thing, she said. The accident. Was that real or was that part of some plan too? Cole's face crumpled. Grace, no. The accident was completely real. Everything I felt, everything we shared, that was all real. Grace studied his face for a long moment. I don't know what's real anymore. She went inside and closed the door. leaving Cole standing alone on her porch in his expensive suit, looking like he'd lost everything that mattered. Through her window, Grace watched as Cole sat back down on the steps and put his head in his hands. Part of her wanted to go back outside and let him explain, but a bigger part of her felt like her whole world had just turned upside down. The man she'd been falling in love with didn't exist. In his place was a stranger with enough money to solve all her problems, but who had chosen to keep that secret while she suffered. Grace didn't know if she could ever forgive him for that. Grace didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cole in that expensive suit, talking to the hospital board like he owned the world. Which she realized he probably did. By morning, she'd made a decision. She was going to focus on her work and forget about Cole Bennett, or Jackson Bennett, or whoever he really was. The hospital was going to be saved, and that was what mattered most. But when Grace arrived at work, she found an envelope waiting for her at the nurse's station. Her name was written on the front in Cole's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. Grace, I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I never wanted to lie to you, but I didn't know how to tell the truth without losing what we had. You deserve better than secrets. The hospital will be taken care of. That's not about us, it's about doing what's right. I'll leave you alone now. Thank you for saving my life in more ways than one. Cole. Grace stared at the letter for a long time. Part of her felt relief that he wasn't going to keep pushing, but another part of her felt an unexpected sadness. Was this really how things were going to end between them? Over the next few days, Grace heard updates about the hospital renovation from Dr. Rodriguez. Jackson Bennett's company was moving fast, new equipment was being ordered, construction crews were being hired, and staff positions that had been cut were being restored. It's amazing, Dr. Rodriguez told Grace during their lunch break. This Bennett fellow seems to understand exactly what we need. He's not just throwing money at problems, he's actually fixing them the right way. That's good, Grace said, trying to sound normal. There's something else, Dr. Rodriguez continued. He's created a new position, Director of Community Health. It would involve working with families, education programs, preventive care. The salary is, she named a number that made Grace nearly choke on her coffee. That's 3 times what I make now. He specifically asked if you'd be interested. Grace felt her heart skip. Me? Why me? He said he'd heard about your work in the community. How you really care about the patients, not just the medical side of things. Dr. Rodriguez studied Grace's face. Grace, do you know Jackson Bennett personally? Grace was quiet for a moment. I thought I did. That evening, Grace sat on her porch alone for the first time in weeks. The farm felt too quiet without Cole's presence. No one was cooking dinner in her kitchen or fixing things around the property. Even her chickens seemed to miss him. They kept looking toward the porch as if waiting for him to appear with their evening feed. She was still sitting there when a familiar truck pulled up her driveway. For a moment, Grace's heart jumped, thinking Cole had come back. But when the driver got out, she saw it was an older man she didn't recognize. Miss Chen, the man called out. I'm Tom Rodriguez. I own the ranch about 5 miles north of here. Grace walked down to meet him. What can I do for you, Mr. Rodriguez? Well, it's more what I can do for you, Tom said with a smile. Jackson Bennett asked me to bring you something. Tom walked to the back of his truck and lowered the tailgate. Inside was Grace's old tractor, except it wasn't old anymore. It had been completely restored, painted bright red, with new tires and what looked like a brand new engine. I don't understand, Grace said. Jackson brought this to my shop about a week ago, Tom explained. Said it belonged to someone special who'd been kind to him, and he wanted to make sure it would run perfectly for years to come. Tom handed Grace a set of keys. He paid me extra to deliver it when he couldn't do it himself. Grace stared at the beautiful tractor. Cole had mentioned that her old tractor needed work, but she told him she couldn't afford to fix it properly. There's something else, Tom said. He pulled a small wooden box from the truck's cab. He asked me to give you this too. Inside the box was the wooden bird Cole had been carving on her porch, now finished and polished to a beautiful shine. Underneath it was another note. I started carving this the day after you saved me. I thought it would be nice to give you something I made with my hands, not something I bought with my money. I finished it because I wanted you to know that what we had was real, even if I wasn't honest about everything else. See, Grace felt tears starting in her eyes as she held the carved bird. Miss, Tom said gently. I've known Jackson since he was a boy. His grandmother owned a small ranch next to mine, and he used to spend summers there. Even as a kid, he never acted like he was better than anyone else, even though his family had money. Really? Really? And I've never seen him care about someone the way he talks about you. He made me promise to tell you that he meant every word he ever said to you, except for the parts about being broke. Tom smiled. Said to tell you he's not broke, but he was broken and you fixed him. After Tom left, Grace sat on her porch holding the wooden bird and thinking. She was still angry about the lies, but she was starting to understand why Cole had been afraid to tell the truth. How many people had pretended to care about him just because of his money? The next morning, Grace made a decision. She drove to the address Dr. Rodriguez had given her, Jackson Bennett's temporary office in town. She found Cole sitting behind a desk covered with hospital plans and construction schedules. He looked up when she walked in, his face full of hope and worry. "Grace," he said, standing up quickly, "I didn't think you'd come." "I got your gifts," Grace said. "The tractor and the bird." Cole's face reddened. "I hope that was okay. I just wanted to do something that wasn't about money." Grace looked around the office at all the plans for the hospital. "Except this is about money. All of this." "No," Cole said firmly. "This is about you." "What do you mean?" Cole came around the desk to stand in front of her. "Grace, I've had money my whole life. I've donated to hospitals and charities all over the country, but I never really understood what any of it meant until I met you." "I don't understand." "When you talked about Mrs. Patterson bringing her grandchildren in when they had fevers, or Mr. Rodriguez checking his blood pressure twice a week, I realized that hospitals aren't just buildings and equipment. They're about people taking care of people." Cole's voice was earnest. "You showed me that." Grace felt some of her anger starting to fade. "Cole, I need to know something. When you first met me, did you know who I was? Was this some kind of plan?" "Grace, I was unconscious in a ditch," Cole said with a small smile. If that was a plan, it was a terrible one. Despite everything, Grace found herself smiling too. "That's true. Everything I told you about my feelings was real," Cole continued. "I fell in love with you because you're kind and smart and you care about people more than yourself. Not because I needed you to help me with some business plan." Grace was quiet for a moment, looking at the hospital renovation plan spread across his desk. "The job offer," she said finally. "Is that real?" "Completely real. Grace, I want to create something here that really works. A hospital that serves the community the way it should. But I need someone who understands what this community actually needs." Cole paused. "I need you. As a business partner?" Cole stepped closer to her. "As everything, if you'll let me." Grace looked into his eyes and saw the same man who had fixed her fence and cooked her breakfast and carved her a wooden bird with his own hands. "The money didn't change those things. I'm still mad at you," she said softly. "I know, and it's going to take time for me to trust you completely again." "I understand." Grace reached out and took his hand. "But I think we can work on it." Cole's face lit up with relief and joy. "Really? Really?" "But no more secrets, Cole. Jackson. Whatever you want me to call you." "Cole is fine," he said, squeezing her hand. "That's who I want to be with you." 6 months later, Grace stood in front of the newly expanded Riverside General Hospital, addressing a crowd gathered for the grand opening. As the hospital's new director of community health, she was explaining all the new programs they'd be offering. Free health screenings, education classes, support groups for families. In the crowd, she could see Cole standing next to Dr. Rodriguez and the hospital board, beaming with pride. On her left hand, Grace wore a simple diamond ring. Cole's proposal had come not with expensive gifts, but with a promise to build a life together based on shared values and genuine love. "This hospital represents something important," Grace told the crowd. "It shows what's possible when people come together to take care of each other. When